The military is undergoing a massive top-down overhaul, but the core question is the Pentagon really declaring war on its own peacetime culture?
That is exactly the mandate, it seems. We're digging into the details of this really high-stakes internal meeting a key leaders all call at Quantico.
Yeah, summoning generals and admirals from, well, everywhere.
From all over the globe, yeah. To hear one single, blunt message.
And the news hook here is huge, right? The message from the new War Secretary, Pete Hegseth, was pretty direct. Get fit, get on board with the Trump agenda, or get out.
That's the gist. So this deep dive, we're looking at the radical shifting priorities using two main sources. First, you've got the details from this historic meeting itself.
The Come to Jesus meeting, as some are calling it. It outlines the official renaming back to the War Department.
Right. And second, we're looking at the money side. A really comprehensive conservative defense budget proposal from the Heritage Foundation. It completely backs up this strategic shift.
And that proposal pushes money hard towards procurement, focuses squarely on the Indo-Pacific, and restoring what they call core lethality.
Exactly. So the big challenge Hegseth is tackling here is whether the U.S. military can actually prioritize being a lethal fighting force over, well, his words, being a social laboratory.
Especially, with threats heating up from China, Russia, Iran, North Korea.
Precisely. So let's unpack that cultural reckoning first, because just the name change itself it's huge.
Department of Defense is out, War Department is back in.
Yeah, Hegseth declared, quote, "The era of the Department of Defense is over. The singular mission now is war fighting, preparing for war, and preparing to win." That's the message.
So the name itself is a mission statement. And right away, he zeroes in on how the forces run, arguing that personnel is policy.
That's the key lever. The goal, he says, is clearing out the debris, his term, and ending what he calls the war on warriors.
How? By making sure leaders are, competent, qualified, professional, agile, aggressive, innovative, risk-taking, apolitical, faithful to their oath. Quite a list.
A very specific list, and he was incredibly clear about what that debris pile actually includes. Our sources detail him just rejecting non-military spending, political stuff he sees as distractions.
Okay, so what specifically is getting cut? What's in the debris pile?
Well, the directive orders an end to, and again, these are his terms, identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses.
Okay.
Also, quote, climate change worship. He explicitly said the department is done with anything promoting division, distraction, or gender delusions.
It's blunt.
Extremely blunt. The sources frame this as sort of a return to basics, to common sense. Hegseth summed it up with this golden rule test for leaders.
A golden rule test. How does that work in a military context?
He basically told them, do unto your unit as you would have done unto your own child's unit.
Ah, okay, so the implication is pretty stark.
Right. Would you want your own kids serving with troops who are, quote, fat or unfit or undertrained? Or in a unit where standards were, lowered for whatever reason?
And the expected answer is?
Hell no. That's the standard he's setting.
Which leads us right into the new rules on physical fitness and appearance. This must be causing some friction.
Oh, absolutely. Especially for the current establishment. He was blunt again, saying it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals.
So no more exceptions at the top. And he's putting standards in writing for everyone.
For everyone. Every single member of the Joint Force. You have to take a PT test, meet height and weight standards, not once, but twice a year.
Twice a year. Wow.
Yeah.
From private to general.
That's the rule. And the training itself. Required PT every single duty day.
Okay, but what kind of PT?
And he specified, this isn't hot yoga and stretching. It has to be real hard PT.
So real workouts. And beyond fitness, there are appearance rules too.
Yep. That brings us to the Beardos directive, as it's being called.
Right, the beards.
Hegseth said the era of unprofessional appearance is over, which means, quote, no more beardos, and an end to rampant and ridiculous shaving profiles.
His solution.
Pretty simple. If you want a beard, you can join Special Forces. If not, then shave.
Okay, but let's clarify the shaving profiles bit. Those aren't just guys who don't feel like shaving, right?
No, not usually. Often they're medical waivers. For things like pseudofolliculitis Barbie razor bumps, which can be a serious skin condition for some troops.
So getting rid of those waivers, that forces a tough choice for some people. Comply or deal with a medical issue.
It definitely enforces a very specific traditional military look, and it speaks to the first, and maybe most controversial, of his 10 directives, the standards for combat jobs.
Combat MOS, yeah. What's the change there?
The mandate requires every combat MOS to return to the highest male standard only, period.
Okay, that's a direct reversal of recent trends. This goes right at the heart of debates the services have been having for years, like with the Army Combat Fitness Tests, the ACFT.
Exactly. That's the prime example in the sources. Remember, when the Army first tried a gender-neutral ACFT, RAND data showed only about 52% of active duty enlisted women could pass it.
Compared to what for men?
Compared to 92% of men, a huge gap.
And that data led the Army to scrap the gender-neutral idea and go with gender norming instead, right? Different scoring scales for men and women.
They did. But Hegseth explicitly rejected that. He flat out refused gender norming.
Why? What's the rationale?
His argument, according to the sources, is that if you accept different testing standards, you're accepting differences in potential combat readiness.
So one standard for all in combat roles.
Yes. He's quoted saying standards must be uniform, gender neutral, and high. If not, they're not standards, they're just suggestions.
Suggestions that get our sons and daughters killed. That's the end of the quote, right?
That's the quote. It's a hard line.
Strategically, you can see the push for absolute readiness. But isn't there a risk here? Eliminating gender norming, getting rid of DEI offices, could that actually hurt recruiting? Which, let's face it, has had its struggles.
Well, that's the tension, isn't it? The War Department's line, via Hegseth, is that quality trumps quantity. But interestingly, the sources do claim this shift is already boosting numbers.
Really? They're reporting success already.
Yeah, they mention a reported surge in new enlistments and that the Army hit its highest recruiting standards month early. So they're framing it as a positive reversal.
Okay, so besides fitness and standards,
Yeah.
how else is this cultural reset affecting leadership?
It extends to how leaders manage their troops day to day. There's this thing called the no more walking on eggshells policy.
No more walking on eggshells. What does that mean in practice?
It means a full review of how terms like toxic leadership, bullying, and hazing are defined and used.
Why?
Hegseth's argument is that these terms have been, his words, weaponized and bastardized to undermine good NCOs and commanders who are just trying to enforce standards.
So the goal is to empower commanders.
Right, to let them enforce these new high standards without fear of retribution or second guessing. And it specifically involves overhauling the Inspector General, the IG, and the MEO, Military Equal Opportunity processes.
To do what?
To, quote, end frivolous complaints, make it harder for disgruntled troops to derail leaders, basically.
Okay, so the cultural framework is set. Ruthless efficiency, high standards, focus on lethality. But that costs money. How does the budget align with this?
That's where the Heritage Foundation's Conservative Defense Budget proposal for FY 2025 comes in. It's presented as the financial engine for this whole shift.
And it flows from a specific strategy.
Absolutely. The strategy is called denial. Simple goals. Defend the U.S. homeland and deny China's, quote, imperial ambitions. China is explicitly named the #1 challenge.
So how does the money reflect that? We're talking about an imbalance in current spending.
A big one. We need to get into the weeds a bit with budget terms here. RDT&E versus procurement.
Okay. RDT&E is research, development, test, and evaluation, funding future tech.
Exactly. Stuff like designing the next fighter jet. In FY 2023, that RDT&E pot was $140 billion.
And procurement.
That's the money for buying the stuff you need now. Ships, planes, ammo. That was $167 billion in FY 23.
So RDT&E funding was almost as much as procurement funding. $140 billion versus $167 billion.
Yeah, about 84%. RDT&E was 84% of procurement. Think of it like RDT&E is designing a fancy new stove for your kitchen someday, but procurement is buying the actual food you need to eat tonight.
And Heritage is saying we're spending too much on designing stoves and not enough on buying food.
Pretty much. The proposal argues we're seriously out of balance. The strategy demands shifting funds away from some R&D and especially from these big, bloated, defense-wide accounts.
Bureaucracy, essentially.
Right. And pouring that money directly into procurement. Buying more weapons, more ammo, more platforms. Now...
Is there a specific number tied to that shift?
Yep. The proposal recommends $18.8 billion in specific cuts from that defense-wide bureaucracy and RDT&E, redirected straight to the military services for lethal capabilities.
Lethal capabilities. Because they argue our current stockpiles are too low.
Dangerously low, according to the sources. They argue that even advanced planes like the F-35 are, quote, nearly useless without enough munitions.
And the numbers on those munitions, They're concerning.
They're alarming, frankly, especially looking at a potential Taiwan conflict. War games cited suggest our stocks of key missiles, LRASMs, the long-range anti-ship missiles, and JSSM-ER cruise missiles.
Yeah.
They'd be used up in as little as 8 days.
8?
Terrifyingly fast. And it's not just missiles. Look at ground warfare. The 70,000 GMLRS rockets we've bought, guided multiple launch rocket system rockets. Enough for maybe minimal firing for less than 2 months. The estimate for a 6-month fight is something like 432,000 needed. We're nowhere close.
So the problem isn't just the total defense budget number, it's what we're buying and the capacity of the factories, the defense industrial base, to actually build this stuff fast enough.
Exactly. You can't just flip a switch and get thousands of missiles tomorrow.
So how do the sources propose fixing that? Fixing the industrial base bottleneck?
The key is sending a strong, consistent demand signal. That means the government needs to commit to buying large quantities over several years.
Multi-year contracts.
Right. The proposal calls for dramatically increased procurement using multi-year contracts for critical weapons like Tomahawk cruise missiles, TLAMs, and Mk-48 torpedoes.
The idea is that guarantees business for the defense companies.
Precisely. It gives them the confidence to invest their own money in expanding factories, hiring workers, fixing supply chains, because they know the orders will be there for years to come.
Okay, so pulling it all together, we're seeing this dramatic, almost whiplash-inducing shift, both in military culture back to basics, high physical standards, merit, purging perceived woke distractions.
Yeah, a real cultural overhaul.
And in the budget. A concrete plan to spend potentially $1 trillion by 2026, focus heavily on ships, planes, and especially ammunition, all aimed squarely at the Indo-Pacific threat.
And as we mentioned, the narrative pushed in the sources is that this is already working. They claim enlistments are surging, recruiting standards are up, reversing the recent downturn.
They claim early success. But the internal test, the real challenge, that still lies ahead, doesn't it?
Absolutely. War Secretary Hegseth basically threw down the gauntlet. He told leaders whose hearts sink at this new direction, then you should do the honorable thing and resign.
It's a stark choice. So the final thought for you to consider is this. What really happens when this mandate for, frankly, ruthless standards and total focus on warfighting crashes against the career paths and maybe the comfort level of a bureaucracy built up over decades of relative peacetime?
Yeah, a bureaucracy often geared towards compliance and stability, not necessarily radical change and risk-taking. This new War Department culture,
Yeah.
it has to win its own internal battle first.